Good afternoon, and we are live here from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference. That is the 54th. I am here joined by Dr. Nicol Turner Lee.
Hello.
Hi, she is Miss Tech Extraordinaire. She is a strategist. She's also a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute.
I am.
And she's the new director of
the AI Equity. Well, I'm the director of the Center for Technology Innovation, but for people listening, I also founded an AI Equity Lab.
Nice. So tell me a little bit about your book. You know, when we talk about, what's happening, you were on the stage earlier. There's a lot of conversation about how AI is going to actually help improve our lives. There's some skeptics out there. I see you. But tell me a little bit about your book and why you decided that this was the way to go.
Well, first and foremost, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be at the annual legislative conference where we're having these conversations.
Correct.
And I'm excited to be in this booth. Listen, people out there, we think that everyone's connected. We think that just because you have a technology in your purse or in your pocket, or you may have a computer at home or in your classroom, that everybody is actually using the internet for the same things. I'm here to tell you, I wrote this book for the digitally invisible people.
Right.
What does that mean? There are people who live in farming communities, Black people in particular,
right,
where having access to technology, it just is non-existent. How many of us have gone to visit our relatives?
And you're like, why?
And you're like, I got to get out of here because I cannot get on the internet.
My data I'm using all my data.
Exactly. But the problem is when you live in a digital desert, it's not just having the lack of access to a computer or to connectivity.
Right.
It's having access to healthcare. It's having information for education.
Right.
It's ensuring that you can check your children's grades or you can talk with your doctor. In the book, I went across the country for about a year and a half before the pandemic, folks, at that. And I found out that people all across the country were digitally invisible.
Correct.
What that means is a woman was in a parking lot of a library, a Black woman, crying because she needed a library card, only to find out when I talked with her that she needed it because she had stage 4 breast cancer.
Wow.
And going to a public library was the only way to talk to her doctor. There are people that are day laborers. That box that we all rely on to actually speak to our boo and our friends. Well, guess what? This day laborer ran out of minutes halfway through the month and he could not find work. So I think it's important, Adia, that we understand that, yes, we have to fight for civil rights, voting rights in particular. We have to keep these conversations top of mind. But technology is making us invisible in our process of electoral politics. And girl, with AI, can we talk about it?
Listen, I mean, if people talk about how ChatGPT has actually helped them become the back office, it's become the back office for a lot of people. When you think about content creation, how AI literally, cuts down the amount of research time. Sometimes the strategy that you would normally have to pay somebody to help you build out what your product, your service, or your marketing. ChatGPT does it. It does it. And there's a lot of other generative softwares that's out there that allow you to do the same. But what people tend to forget is it has to be accessible.
Yes.
It has to be accessible. If I tell you that you have a resume that you need to fill out, and I say, ChatGPT will give it to you in 3 minutes.
You got to have a device.
You have to have a device to be able to
and connectivity.
And connectivity, right. And I also want to just kind of shout out Comcast. Thank you so much for their earlier sponsorship of the session that you had, because it's things like that. It's sponsors like that who really believe that there has to be some expansion of even what they do.
That's right.
Even what they do, even the services and the products that they provide. So tell me a little bit about that too.
I think that you're spot on, right? So there's always this tension that I have every time I wake up. I want to interrogate the technology.
Correct.
I want people to be connected, but I also want to make sure that we are doing it with agency in mind, that we are using the technology that's developed for us and by us.
Correct.
So what does that mean? It means that people who are not connected to the internet at all will not be able to see the benefits of AI.
Correct.
The woman that was trying to get a library card because of her breast cancer diagnosis, her breast may not even show up in the clinical trials.
Correct.
Leading to the same outcomes for Black women when it comes to chronic disease or terminal illness. When I think about AI, I think about the training data. The fact that we are looking for AI to help us with decision making on credit, but yet the wealth gap that exists among Black communities is actually feeds those systems.
Correct.
And it makes it that it's perpetuated.
Right.
I can go down the line, but to your point, If I think about the 400 plus Black women who have been displaced from the workforce,
Yes.
who are trying to figure out where is my next job or my next business opportunity, AI can help you with that cover letter.
Right.
It can actually help you figure out, am I sending the right tone? Am I
Right.
being, for those of us that are still working, it can help us make sure on that day that we're angry, right? That we're actually using the language that is in the voice of the speaker.
Correct.
It can help us in our businesses on lead generation.
Right.
So I think that we as communities have to do a balancing act. We have to understand that innovation is out the box, that artificial intelligence, digital access, it's here to stay.
Correct.
We are raising a generation that is actually based on technology, whether
Yep.
we like it or not.
I mean, even some of them, when you think about it, I think probably about 5 years ago, we had this whole STEM push with kids
Yes.
to learn how to code. But the AI is coding.
It's coding, and it's
So-
teaching people how to do it in
Yes.
ways that it's so much easier.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is a little bit crazy too is because, for a long time, people kept thinking that technology was going to take their job. But we are understanding that there's a lot of ways that we can get behind this as Black people. It doesn't mean that it's going to have
No.
to take our job. We have to just adapt. We have to be willing to adapt, to reinvent ourselves, to become the scientist, to become the
Yes.
engineer, to become the
The lawyers.
technologist, the
I mean, I'm a
lawyers.
sociologist, and I do
Right.
this work.
Right. So, it's we have to be able to think outside the box. It's not just about the technology, it's the thinking outside the box, but we have to be, we have to take ownership of what it looks like
That's
for
right.
us.
Well, and I think it's also a great opportunity for our community to spend some time thinking about which AI products work best for us.
Correct.
So I think about the makeup industry, and I know that we've been having conversations on
Yes.
beauty and imaging and how we show up, right?
Right.
Technology is available, but it may not always be useful.
Right.
And so where is our ability, and I'm working on a project that I'm so excited about, which is what AI products are actually the better housekeeping seal for Black communities.
Right.
They have reflective data. They might be built by an entrepreneur that looks like us.
Right.
They might understand some of the nuances that come with our intersectionality. Until we actually have that inventory and we're able to use our spending power to also make that point that I want to use AI that is built and optimized for me.
Right.
I think it also makes this an imaginative moment.
Yeah, because there's some cultural nuances that, doesn't
Right.
always get conveyed. The tone, the voice, sometimes slang in its own way.
I did an article, I did an interview with a magazine, and I could share this here, which it just disturbed me. I stayed up for days after doing this interview. We have commercially available tools, and I know we want to lean into where we think as a community we can use it, but we have commercially available tools that can refine deep fakes. It can manipulate video and image and voice. We have tools that are acting like you and calling your grandmother. I don't know how many times I talked to my own mother, and I'm like, that was not me asking you for money.
I do not need money.
Right,
I'm not
that's
asking
right.
you for mortgage money.
That's right.
I will call you myself.
And we have these tools, though, that are so precise that
Correct.
they can actually do this in a way, particularly with generative AI, where they can extract everything from the emotion of that person, right? I actually saw something today, believe it or not, where on dating apps, it can be an AI-generated image and voice and profile, and you might think you're talking to the person that's there, but it's somebody else.
And that's a little weird, because when you think about it, like, your voice is your signature.
That's it. And it's actually your copyright.
It really is your copyright. So when you hear, like, before, from a political standpoint, like, people used to ask, like, these robocalls, right? When you're an organizer, you get these robocalls. How is this going to work out? And now you're like, okay, when I get a phone call from somebody, I'm like, is this really you?
That's
just all of it. But going back to our point before about just where we are.
Keep going.
Where we are as far as, like, your book is concerned, what are some tidbits from your book that you would say, like, if you don't read anything else, you need to read this, but also, like, this is something that was surprising when you were writing the book.
Yes. So I think what was surprising for me is that we talk about the digital divide as a political issue.
Right.
We put it in the hands of policymakers to decide who has access and who doesn't have access. When in actuality, this is a area of digital invisibility, meaning we have to take this out of being so abstract and esoteric and realize that our entire community is affected by the lack of access.
Correct.
So I think it's important, what I found in the book, that I wanted to move away from calling it a digital divide. And I wanted to move into a space where it was about digital invisibility. In fact, I quote Ralph Ellison in the beginning from
Okay.
The Invisible Man, because regardless of what many people do around this country, they will never be connected. That was a surprise for me, because I think as a person who lives in DC,
Right.
or, you know, everybody has
Everything is
access.
correct. And even when I think about just this conference itself, right? We are here, we're producing 3-4 days of content, but but sometimes it doesn't reach the people who need to see it.
That's right.
Because they are not connected.
Yes, and that's the part for me that keeps me up at night. I've been doing this for 30 years. People will also find out from me that I've been doing this work since the 90s. And really, a lot of the issues have stayed the same. Okay. With that being the case, where are we going to break this trajectory where we look at digital access as something that is just not as important, like I mentioned earlier, as voting rights, is when we see that digital access allows people to be much more engaged in the political process, the civic process. There are processes that actually improve their quality of life. But most importantly, the more access we have, it makes us become more vulnerable.
Yes.
So I like to talk about this stuff. I mean, for the people that are listening and watching us, at the Brookings Institution, I have a Tech Tank newsletter. Just think of Tech Tank as real easy, because I got a podcast with the same name.
There you go.
And it's about taking these very complex issues and making them understandable. When I wrote my book, the reason I talked to people across the country is because I wanted my 81-year-old aunt to read it. I didn't want her to think of this as some policy book that only people who understand technology. This is a book where anybody who has been affected by having access or not. I'm dating myself. My first access was a 386 computer, okay? America Online. I don't know if you remember that.
I had it because I was in high school, actually.
Okay.
Plugging in the modem.
I was a grown woman, okay, when American Online came.
Plugging in the modem.
Black Planet.
Yes.
I mean, all of
my
those
mother's
tools.
mad because I'm on the phone and trying to use a computer at the same time. Get off of one of them.
Okay, because you couldn't do both.
You couldn't do both.
I mean, now my kids can do both, and it's in the back of a car and just send a text or email, and I'm right there.
Exactly. So I want to ask you a question about that, because when we talk about this is the generation, right? You know, depending on where you land, you're like, you know, Gen X or millennial. You know, millennials are in a really interesting, like section of their lives. More so because they've been here and they were the generation that dealt with the transition, right? But they're actually raising children, having children that all they know is technology.
Yes.
Like, can you speak to that, like that experience? Because it's a little weird.
Well, you know, it's weird, but I would like to say that many of us were the same. I mean, we grew up with records or VHS players before we got to the point where we have streaming services. So I'd like to debunk, like, all technology creates a shift. And it creates a shift in how we behave. It also creates those incentives where the kid is, I know I had rabbit ear television and I was turning it on before it went dead.
Right.
At midnight, I know my kids actually find themselves, you know, connected to their phones. This country does have to address the fact that we have a digital generation. We have to address the fact that the digital generation is so bombarded by so much technology that it could have an effect. I just wrote a blog that will be out soon. Instead of banning cell phones, ban generative AI. And I did that provocatively because it goes with the same thing. It requires our country, our communities to have civic and digital education.
Right, and accountability.
And literacy. Right, exactly.
And accountability.
But the problem is, like, my mother for a long time, when the pandemic hit, would not do a virtual visit, even though she couldn't go to the doctor physically. But when she realized it was something that she needed to do, she turned her camera around and she spoke to her doctor. I mean, for people who are listening, this has been a quick adjustment, right? Life is one of those things where innovation often outpaces policy and it outpaces our own human understanding. Right. But, you know, I watched the Jetsons and I never thought that they would actually be real.
And I mean, when I think about that, I'm like, woo. Right. Some of the things that we saw then, we didn't really think
it was going to happen.
And we are living in that age, but it's just a little bit different.
It is. And I think we have to be concerned.
Yes. And we have to be a little bit concerned because everybody hasn't caught up to what that looks like.
That's right. I mean, my daughter, I remember during the pandemic when we were pushing back originally on how much screen time young people had or what they were doing. She said to me on the podcast I had as a guest, she said, "Mom, I needed that interaction through these platforms because I was lonely." And so I think the challenge is grown people like ourselves cannot be the ones making policy for young people.
Very true.
And we need to find ways to create conversations, particularly in Black communities, where this is not taboo, but it's something that we learn together. We need to break those old stereotypes and fears that said just because I don't have a GED that I can't go in and talk to my student's high school counselor.
Right.
Folks, I'm a sociologist. You can talk about it.
Okay. So speaking of talking about it, how can people find you online?
You can find my book anywhere. It's on Audible as well, on Amazon, Google, wherever Audible books are sold. Digitally Invisible, How the Internet is Creating the New Underclass. It will be in paperback soon. And I got a new book on the way because I'm going to be the AI educator for our community to make sure we are much more visible. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having coming here. And we'll be done. Thank you so much, everybody.